He's the Hammer horror veteran who served in World War II, received a knighthood, and played countless iconic villains in some of the biggest movie franchises of all time. In the latest epic installment of Arrow in the Head's Horror Hall of Fame, we pay tribute to an industry icon whose career spanned almost 7 decades and saw him appear in excess of 140 films. Who else could it be than Sir Christopher Bloody Lee? The legendary film career of Christopher Lee wasn't always predestined. Although he appeared in a number of plays throughout his school years, his initial career path would see a young Lee volunteer for the military similar to his father. He would go on to serve in World War II as an intelligence officer for the Royal Air Force, before eventually retiring several eventful years later with the rank of flight lieutenant. Finding himself at somewhat of a crossroads, Lee would choose to reintegrate back into civilian life by taking up his cousin's advice and pursuing a career in acting. While he was initially met with resistance from casting agents due to his considerable height, Lee stubbornly persevered through a decade-long drought of small roles for big-name filmmakers like Laurence Olivier, Buster Keaton, and John Huston. But it wasn't until his first foray into the world of Hammer films in 1957 that he would experience his first truly big break, landing the pivotal role alongside Peter Cushing in The Curse of Frankenstein. Hammer had of course been around since the 30s, but were experiencing somewhat of a renaissance during this time, as audiences were seeing classic characters brought to life for the first time in colour. Although Lee muttered no discernible dialogue, he made a sizable enough impression as the creature that he would soon find himself taking on a slew of seductive, villainous characters in the likes of Boris Karloff's Corridors of Blood, The Mummy, and as the iconic Count in 1958's Dracula. The role became an instantly iconic screen portrayal, going down in history as one of the great horror villains against which all other Draculas would be judged. The success of the film was both a blessing and a curse for Lee, as he was forced to appear in subsequent Dracula films with somewhat diminishing returns, and by all accounts diminishing paychecks for the now in-demand actor.
The person who wrote that bit in The Independent on Sunday, last Sunday, as a headline to the piece, they said Christopher Lee cannot escape the curse of Dracula. The person who wrote that is never going to be able to escape the curse of being thought a complete idiot for having written something like that, because it isn't true.
He would play the role of Dracula on 7 different occasions for Hammer, the last of which being 1973's The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Outside his time in the teeth, Lee would try his best to avoid being typecast, bagging roles as widespread as Rasputin, Henry Baskervilles, and both Sherlock and Mycroft Holmes. He would dip his toe into the world of the occult, starring in 2 separate adaptations of good friend Dennis Wheatley's novels. The first of these, The Devil Rides Out, was a massive success both commercially and critically, but its eventual follow-up was anything but. Not only did Wheatley publicly disown 1967's To the Devil a Daughter, but it would mark the end of a successful run for Hammer. It wasn't Lee's only misstep during this period of the late 60s, during which he would also don yellow face makeup to play Fu Manchu on 5 separate occasions, which was problematic to say the least.
I am Fu Manchu.
Fu Manchu? It is impossible. You died.
Untie the girl.
Yeah. He would quickly bounce back, however, with another series of successful pairings with Peter Cushing in the likes of The House That Dripped Blood and Horror Express, as well as the gothic horror of The Creeping Flesh and the folk horror of The Wicker Man.
I believe in the life eternal, as promised to us by our Lord Jesus Christ.
That is good, for believing what you do. We confer upon you a rare gift these days. A martyr's death.
Made on a minuscule budget and netting the actor next to nothing for his services, The Wicker Man became a hugely influential horror film and became somewhat of a personal career highlight for Lee. Its legacy has only been strengthened by the many different iterations over the years. Although the original theatrical version clocked in at 87 minutes, director Robin Hardy had originally cut a longer version, one which sadly never received the proper restoration it deserved. Instead, there exists an extended 96-minute version, a director's cut, and most recently a final cut, which settled on a duration that landed somewhere in the middle. In the wake of The Wicker Man, Lee would step further outside the genre that made his name, finally getting the chance to play a classic Bond villain in The Man with the Golden Gun, more than 10 years after narrowly missing out on Dr. No.
Now that's what I call solar power.
That's what I call trouble.
You must admit, Mr. Bond, I am now undeniably the man with the golden gun.
Playing Frank Scaramanga would expose Lee to a whole new raft of mainstream American audiences, prompting him to take the advice of industry friends and make the move from London to LA. It wouldn't take long for the decision to pay off, with Lee soon working with Steven Spielberg, having a ball on Gremlins 2, and branching out into the world of comedy musicals. He would still find the time to return to some familiar ground, however, appearing with Cushing one last time in House of the Long Shadows.
But then you always were good at falling from a great height.
Can't compare, my dear Geoffrey, with your famous death scenes, which you have played so brilliantly for so many years, bitch.
As well as stepping back into the shoes of Sherlock Holmes for 2 more outings in the early 90s. And as a new millennium dawned, and it looked like Lee was getting lost in a slew of minor supporting characters, he would experience a remarkable career revival. It was around the time Lee appeared in Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow that it became clear the now elder statesman had entered a new phase of fandom. Filmmakers who had grown up with posters of Lee adorning their college dorm rooms were now making full use of his villainous persona in their own passion projects. Tim Burton kicked off a charming tradition of cameos that saw him appear in 5 of the director's films, while notable Gore fan Peter Jackson took full advantage of Lee's considerable Tolkien knowledge when casting him as Saruman in the phenomenally successful Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was only fitting that Lee would follow in the footsteps of old friend Cushing, going on to appear in the latter 2 entries of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. Outside of his film work, Lee would continue to pursue his passion for music, having sung on a number of albums over the years, each time highlighting his famously deep voice. Lee would push the art form to its logical next step by recording a series of his very own heavy metal albums, as well as a Christmas tune or 2.
I sing another version. It's a bit more naughty. It's not bad. I mean bad in the sense of unpleasant. It's entertaining.
Yet for all the energy Lee put into exploring new and exciting avenues, looking back was also a key motivation during the latter stage of his career. In 2011, for the first time in 35 years, he would return to the studio that made his name for the Hammer horror film The Resident. In the same year, he would appear in Martin Scorsese's Hugo, which seemed somewhat fitting for a man paying tribute to the cinema pioneers of old. The admiration would continue to flow as Lee was finally awarded the BAFTA Fellowship for his generous contribution to British cinema. His final on-screen role would be a familiar one, with Lee reprising his role of Saruman for Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy. The director upending production so he could travel to the UK to film the now frail actor's scenes. Sir Christopher Lee passed away at the age of 93 on June 7th, 2015. He was labelled a titan of cinema's golden age, but to true horror fans, he represented something far more tangible. He was the tall, striking actor who gave our monsters a heartbeat. A true original, often imitated, but never bettered. And much like his most famous of characters, his work will live on forever.
So many of them are stars before they even make their first film, and you know when you look at them on the screen that they are looking in a mirror, absolutely in a mirror, and it's beginning of a lifelong romance. And their hand is out underneath the mirror, out of shot, because that's what they want, rich, to be rich and famous immediately, which is terribly sad and extremely dangerous. The most dangerous thing that a young actor or actress can do is to believe their own publicity. Because shelf life, 10 years, if you're a star at 20 or 22 or 3 or 4, if you haven't got it, if you've got it, you've got the right instincts, the right imagination, the right powers of invention, if you have something behind you, some sort of foundations of experience and versatility, that's fine, you will go on, you will last. But if you haven't, and the majority has not got these qualities, and you always play the same part basically, or slight variations on it, and that's all you can do, you'll be through in 10 years or even 5.
Hey, thanks for watching our show. Please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. Listen, we're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.